So the third part to these questions was, this one's a really good one, and I like these sorts of questions. Business wise, what would you tell your 8 years ago self? What would I tell myself 8 years ago? Do you know what I'd tell myself 8 years ago? I'd tell myself that things are good. Things are very good. In 8 years' time, you're going to be sitting in a Dolby Atmos studio, and I'd have gone, what's Dolby Atmos? Oh, that thing you hear in the IMAX cinema. All right, cool. Yeah, that'd be, how does that work in music terms? But if I'd have spoken to, like, you know, I could say to my 8 years ago self, things are going to be really, really good. But the question obviously is, you know, what would I tell myself? What advice would I give myself 8 years ago? What advice would I give myself? One thing I will just quickly say is I'm a firm believer that when it comes to the process of how everything's gone, the reason certain things have worked is because of the timing of doing them, right? Now, if, for instance, now the one thing I would have told myself 8 years ago is how powerful online marketing is, how powerful advertising is, how powerful doing interviews with companies, brand recognition, all these sorts of things, doing these videos, just generally talking to your clients and customers and kind of, let's call, fan base, generally kind of putting yourself out there as a kind of social media, let's say, influencer, but a person that's kind of on the internet as a face as such. I would have said to myself then, do all these sorts of things, get on YouTube early, start driving lots and lots and lots of money into YouTube, building a big YouTube channel. We spent a lot of time with Facebook driving a fan base through Facebook, and Facebook's kind of tailed off a little bit now. It's not as popular as obviously it used to be, say 10 years ago. Instagram then kind of took over, which is still Facebook, but Instagram came in, and then now it's kind of gone into TikTok, and it kind of went Snapchat a little bit in between. And it's generally what the younger generation pick up as the platform of choice. And at the moment, TikTok is that platform. So yeah, that's what I would have told my 8 years ago self. You know, get a social media big presence in certain platforms. But what I will say about this question is, I am a firm believer that things like everything that happened through the stages of the past 8 years, I'm not going to go with that cliche, they happened for a reason, but I'm going to say that they were done at the right times. Now, if I'd have gone back 8 years ago and spent the type of money I'm spending now on advertising, the reason I spend a lot of money on advertising now is because I've got something brilliant to advertise, you know, and the service technically hasn't changed, but the look and the equipment and all these sorts of things, like my backdrop before would have been, it's not as impressive as what's behind me now. So the adverts wouldn't be as impressive. The service technically obviously has improved since 8 years ago, but the actual kind of ability to sell that service wasn't there as good as it is now. Like, selling this service now is very easy because we've got, you know, a client list that's ridiculous of some of the biggest projects in the world, and movies in the world we've worked on and things like that. So it's very much, it's very easy to sell. And we've got like testimonials of like hundreds of testimonials of people just kind of saying how amazing the service is. You know, we've got equipment that is ridiculously good. And I mean, the mastering studio is even more impressive than this studio. So that wasn't the case back then. So back 8 years ago, that wasn't the case. So if I'd have funneled lots of money into advertising, I I probably wouldn't have been able to pick up as many clients as I do through advertising, because the image of the company wasn't as good as the image of the company is now. Um, so advertising really, really works now, but it might not have done then. And had I spoken to my 8 years ago self, I'd have said, look, put lots of money into advertising and you'll grow rapidly. Um, but that's not necessarily the case. That wouldn't have been the case back then. I'd have actually most probably put a load of money into the advertising and it not yielded as good results as now, and probably maybe lost money, although it would have picked up more work. And it would have any advertising, whatever you're advertising, is beneficial. There's always going to be someone that wants your service. But yeah, it might have turned a loss over a period of time. But whereas at the moment, it turns big profits. So there's not a great deal I would tell myself. I'd maybe have said, invest in Uber or something, something stupid like that. Just like, but I don't think that's generally the question I'm being asked here. What would I really tell myself if I was to go back 8 years? That's all I'd really. I don't feel like I need to tell my 8 years ago self too much, because it's not like it ain't gone really well. It's gone amazingly well over the past 8 years. So over the past 8 years has been brilliant. I wouldn't change a thing. I honestly wouldn't change a thing. So I'd kind of just I'd go back to my 8-year-old self and kind of go, keep doing what you're doing. But one thing that did happen maybe 6-7 years ago was that kind of got into a position where we had lots and lots of work, and we were working on some great things, and we had lots and lots of work, and we got a reality check at that point when we stopped doing advertising and doing the online thing, and didn't do all the extracurricular stuff like these videos and all these different things that we were doing. We stopped doing them because we were a bit like, well, we don't need to advertise now. We don't need to pick up new clients because we've got all this work. And it was a little bit naive of me to think that, because you need to advertise, you need to keep putting content like this out there, because you need to keep constantly picking up new work. It's not just gonna, word of mouth isn't just gonna fill your studio. So we had to, we at that point stopped doing as much advertising. And if I go back to my 8 years ago self, I would say to them, realize that you have to do all this extra stuff that now I just do because it's all just part of the job. People think of like, when you run a company like this, people think, all you do is you're a mixing engineer, you do mixing, this is what you're paid to do, you're paid to do that. But my job as well is getting in the work, so that it's I can do that, and Nick can do that in the mastering studio, so I have to build this kind of the website and updating things, and the content that keeps us relevant. That's what I tell my 8-year-old self, is just to keep pushing and keep doing all the good things that you're doing. Do not stop doing them. As soon as you stop doing them, you stop getting work, and the work gradually will start slowing down. And that's yeah. And the only reason I wouldn't tell my 8 years ago self more stuff is because there wasn't that many things there's not that many things I can tell myself then that went wrong. Everything went right and everything was done really well, and that would maybe be the only thing, is that don't go through a phase where you think you don't have to do any of this, because you do have to do it, and if you don't do it, you will stop getting work in.